G'day and welcome back to Critical AFL on YouTube for today's episode of WAFL-Watch, where I'll be reviewing the WAFL Eagles' loss against the East Perth Royals in another decent showcase of all the AFL-listed talent as they continue to build their form in the twos. In today's episode, I'll be covering best players for the WAFL Eagles, some promising performances and where I see these performances landing long term, my key takeaways from the match, and then, as always, predictions for who will be pressing for a spot in the AFL side next week, which will be against St Kilda. But first, as always, I need to make my humble request to everyone watching this video to please consider subscribing to this channel if you haven't already. Most of my long-term subscribers to this channel are probably familiar with my spiel that no future videos will be monetized until the channel reaches 1,000 followers. And after a pretty busy 6 months churning out regular content, that goal looks like it's finally pretty close to being within reach. As a viewer, subscribing doesn't cost you a thing, and it just means that you'll never miss my weekly AFL and WAFL reviews, which hopefully give some pretty useful insights into how the side's building and also who's likely to come in and out of the senior squad. So if you enjoy these little insights, please consider subscribing, as once the channel is monetized, it will be a lot easier to justify all the time, effort, and general household pressure of putting out regular content. But now to our best players. Also, I apologise in advance for my voice. I've been a little bit sick this week, so it might sound a little bit different to usual. But once again, for me, at the top of the best players list was Clay Hall. When team selection came out on Thursday afternoon, my eyes nearly popped out of my head. I did that forehead thing looking at my phone because Hall wasn't even listed on the extended bench. And I said to myself that if we lose to Richmond on Sunday, I'm going to blame it on McWalter leaving him out of the side. Even if I'm ignoring his great forward form, there's also a balance to our AFL midfield that I think Hall brings, and I thought we saw that against Brisbane. So I think there's a lot of good reasons for him to be in there. I don't know why he's not, but hopefully after this performance this weekend, it's the last time that I have to bang on that door on my little YouTube mountain, which I'm sure that no one at West Coast actually sees. But anyway, his performance in the WAFL, he was reliable on the inside again this week. He got better every quarter that went by, ended up with 20 possessions, which was the most of anybody on the ground, keeping himself busy on the inside evenly across those 4 quarters as well. But I think the last quarter, he might have racked up something close to 10. So we'll see how he goes at selection next week. We'll be playing St Kilda after Richmond, and I just personally think the AFL side needs him in that mix. Next best for me was Jack Williams. I think Jack Williams has been too good for WAFL for a while now. And from what I can tell, most fans don't tend to enjoy seeing him dropped either. On one hand, I do get it. Bailey Williams had a great week as a forward last week, and he also offers more options for us double-teaming opposition ruckman, which is one of our biggest weaknesses. So as long as he does have that forward craft, which is important when we don't follow that, it's important that he has the forward craft so that we don't follow that failed blueprint some sides have had, playing just 2 ruckmen and thinking one of them is just naturally going to be a forward. So in a sense, there's no guarantee that Jack Williams walks back into the squad, even on the back of a really big performance. But we are most definitely spoilt for choice with key forwards. And when he does get the call, he'll come in and have an immediate impact like he always does. Against East Perth, he just looked bigger and stronger in all the marking contests, and was a bit of a nightmare for the Royals' key defenders to just do anything to stop him. He finished with 2 goals, probably should have been more, and a bunch of strong contested marks along the middle of the ground also. So he definitely imposed himself on the match, and he led the charge early in the third quarter when we had a brief little mini comeback, taking 2 marks directly in front of goal. The first was a goal. The second one he unfortunately missed. Then he immediately made up for it, taking a really strong contested mark on the 50, just almost immediately afterward. And he delivered the ball to Colin Livingston right in front of goals, who kicked the goal. So also, just on a little side note while I'm talking about Jack Williams, I have to say personally, I really hate that the AFL Players Association got rid of listing players' weights publicly. You used to be able to find it on team bios and AFL bios. Just because it's an important stat. And for me, it really doesn't have any of the same implications about being overweight that it might for, normal people sharing what they weigh, or just anything relevant to that when you're talking about professional athletes. It's really about, their strength or their muscle, their height, mainly because I'm just curious what Jack Williams weighs now and how much he's managed to put on over the years. He just looks like he spent a lot of time in the weights room, and it's actually really difficult for opposition key backs to budge him. So I'd love to really be able to have clean access to that stat every year and just to see where it's moving. But clearly they thought that was some sort of insult on the players, so we don't have that anymore. I digress though. After a slightly quieter few weeks, my third best was Tyrell Dewar, back at the top of my favourites list. He had 25 possessions and looks back to his best that we all saw pre-season as well as in those opening AFL rounds this year. He definitely needed that stint back in the WAFL, may still do, because his form had dropped. And I don't think there's any certainty that he just comes back into the side just on the back of one, elite performance. But what's more important is he has star AFL qualities and he started utilising those qualities again rather than just getting the numbers like he did last week. And as far as I've heard from interviews, the coaches and the selection committee, they seem to see it the same way also when it comes to his AFL attributes and traits and qualities. Probably the same word, that actually. The damage he did with his possessions is what I found most notable this week. He was really slick by hand deep in congestion of defence, and his running carry was back as well. And there was also some really creative playmaking passes, including one really genius little piece of play between Dewar and Champion that ran back and forth between the two of them all the way down the wing, and then ended up with this lob of a kick because Champion had been beside him and he just popped it up in the air. Champion ran onto it amongst a whole bunch of East Perth players and took it, and then he was able to deliver inside 50 to another target who kicked a goal. So it was probably one of the best paces of play for the day, and that was just watching those two really get together on the end of a good run. Other guys who were really good for us included Rhett Bazzo, Noah Long, Malachi Champion, and Cohen Livingston. After years of interrupted pre-seasons and lack of match fitness because of it, I think Bazzo looks ready for AFL. He was a cut above the WAFL, and he has had some really good games all year. This week, he really showed his athleticism as well as that composure and a heap of ball smarts that I think we knew he had from his first season before he started getting his injuries and setbacks. He's got his hands on it quite a bit in defence, and it was also in all the right ways as one of the more mobile key defenders. There were a lot of marks, a lot of those team possessions at the contest, and he did a really good job distributing the ball by foot, which really opens up the entire ground coming out of D50 when you've got someone who can hit those targets either left or right as soon as they're open. I think we're at the point now where anytime we want to call on a 195 centimetre athletic defender, he should be considered ready. I don't think that means that he's banging on the door or forcing his way in or anything, but that we've just got an AFL ready option in Bazzo in a part of the ground where we've been pretty vulnerable. I think everyone's pretty aware of our key defence stocks at the moment. Noah Long had a lot of clever, high intensity, just sort of typical Noah Long moments that put him in our better players, but probably not to the extent where he's headed for selection. It's more just an update that he's really getting himself back into the game in the WAFL. As far as small forwards go, I think Malachi Champion looks likely to be the next in line out of the two of them. He had a fair few highly effective moments and just generally looks too good for the opposition around him whenever he gets his opportunities. Cohen Livingston, has had his best couple of weeks in his time at West Coast in the last fortnight. His physical presence is what stands out most for me. He looks like he's probably the strongest guy on the field when he's out there. He takes a good contested mark, lays a really heavy tackle, and he doesn't come down easily with the ball in his hands in traffic either. I don't think he's forcing his way into the AFL side, but I didn't want to ignore his performance in our better players the last couple of weeks. And that pretty much covers the best and promising performances. My key takeaways from the loss to East Perth are, number one, our opponent today, East Perth, are a class act. For me personally, they're the most impressive WAFL side that I've seen this year. I think Claremont probably had the best midfield, but East Perth were all round the better, and their inside 50s were of AFL quality, even under pressure. So it's an important thing just to take into account when you measure how the WAFL Eagles are continuing to build form. We didn't play badly today, more importantly is what I'm getting at, just as the quality of the opposition was the highest it's been all year, and I thought we were actually able to match that, even scoreboard aside. The second takeaway is that we can really tell the difference when neither Matt Flynn or Bailey Williams are in our WAFL side. The dominance that those two have provided in the ruck all year, I think, has offered a lot of confidence and development for the young midfield that we've got in the WAFL. And I guess the positive way of looking at that is hopefully that their notable absence in the WAFL today is a good sign for their combined impact in the AFL tomorrow against Richmond. I think that they are a combo that is probably due to do a bit of damage. We haven't seen them really together because I think there's been concerns over whether we had any forward craft, and Bailey Williams has managed to learn a bit of that. So I'm looking forward to seeing that combo, is what I'm saying, tomorrow. And that pretty much brings me to the final segment of these little episodes, which is my predictions for the AFL side next week. And before I go through them, I'll start with a little insight into this process just so that everyone who's listening sort of knows. But when I give these predictions, they're in the order, starting with the most likely changes next week and then descending from there. And it's probably an important point to mention because the first change that needs to be considered for next week's selection is that Jeremy McGovern should be fit to return to the AFL side. He just had that concussion, which I'd imagine is a stock standard protocol rather than any severe symptoms. So there's really reverse pressure on key defenders from the AFL. And that just means that good performances from guys like Rhett Bazzo doesn't really mean that there's an immediate call-up imminent, which I know I was saying earlier when I was talking about him. But it just shows that it's more the medium term at best where you're looking with Rhett Bazzo. As I keep saying, number 2, Clay Hall is still demanding a spot in the AFL side, which feels like it's not so much a case of if, but when. And then thirdly, if anybody else is a chance to come back in the AFL side next week, it's Jack Williams. But I think that'll really depend on how the Bailey Williams-Matt Flynn combo goes this weekend. And obviously we haven't seen that game yet. So if you're watching that, it doesn't appear to be working out, then you could probably expect Jack Williams to force his way back into the side. Otherwise, there's also an outside chance for either Tyrell Dewar or Malachi Champion in the AFL, although I'm not sure if that'll be sooner or later, more of a medium-term thing as well. Anyway, that wraps up this week in WAFL-Watch on Critical AFL. I hope everyone enjoyed, or at least got some useful information out of that review. And if you're subscribed to the channel, I'll hopefully see you all again tomorrow after the big win over the Tigers at the MCG. Just a little heads up, though. Tomorrow is Mother's Day, so at the very best, it will be a late night review just because my wife does such a good job as a mother that is the number one priority for the day, and putting these reviews out will just have to come when it comes. But otherwise, thank you very much for tuning in, and I will see you at some point for that Richmond review. And until then,